Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I have a quick tutorial for you on how to plant clematis in containers. We are going to chat about how to choose the right clematis for your garden. I'm going to suggest you a couple of varieties that can work across different garden situations, across different sun exposures. We are going to obviously talk about the choice of the container, what type, what size, what substrate, and I'm going to share with you a couple of tips on how to give your clematis a good start in your garden. So in today's video you will learn everything that you need to know about planting clematis in containers, and then make sure you're subscribed to the channel because later in the season I'm also going to share with you a guide on how to grow clematis in containers. So everything that you need to know about looking after and caring for your clematis in the growing season. So let's begin. Alright, so I think that clematis requires no special introduction. We all know these beautiful plants, they are garden favorites, and no wonder. They come in so many beautiful flower sizes, shapes and colors, and the clematis itself varies greatly from vines through compact patio species all the way to very small, very short herbaceous perennials. But I think it's the vines that are the most popular and the vines that we are gonna focus on in today's video. So obviously the first thing that you're gonna take in consideration is the sun exposure. Well, good news here because clematis is very adaptable, and I dare say there is a clematis for every garden. Ideally though, clematis prefers partial sun to partial shade. So a little bit of sun, a little bit of shade. We often say clematis likes its foliage in the sun, but then the roots in the shade. So if these are the conditions you can provide in your container garden, that's perfect. You can grow pretty much any clematis that you want. But I want to focus on the extreme ends of that sun range, so on full shade and full sun, like hot blazing afternoon sun, because you can still grow clematis in these conditions. You just need to pick the right ones. So for full shade, I myself garden in a shady container garden. My garden receives between 0 and 4 hours of morning sunlight, depending on which parts of the balcony you look at, and I grow 3 different types of clematis in my garden. So for full shade, if your garden receives very little to no direct sunlight at all, I would recommend those early blooming clematises. Spring blooming clematis, group 1, something like Clematis montana. There are many beautiful varieties in Clematis montana. I have Clematis montana Maylene in my garden. These do really well. Clematis macropetala, Clematis alpina, another beautiful clematis with bell-shaped flowers. Comes in many different color variations. Then for summer bloomers, there is one clematis that's often recommended, and that's Clematis Nelly Moser, a beautiful large flowered clematis with pink flowers. So if you lack a little bit of color in summer, this clematis will be good for full shade. Now for full hot blazing afternoon sun, here where I live, the temperatures can reach up to 40 degrees Celsius in the shade. So in full sun, as you can imagine, the temperatures reach over 50 degrees Celsius, and we still plant clematises even in these extreme conditions. One of my favorites is Clematis arabella. This is a very small, very compact, very beautiful clematis with very small purple, almost lilac colored flowers. Here for us it blooms from late spring all the way until late autumn. Group 3 is very resistant. You could also plant group 1, the spring flowering ones. These also tend to do really well. The only type of clematis I would avoid, especially if you are just starting your journey with clematises and you don't have much experience with them, I would rather stay away from the large flowered clematises because these tend to be a little bit more sensitive, and these clematises don't appreciate intense heat. And the second important thing to take in consideration is the size of the clematis and the space you have available. Keep in mind that clematises are very fast, very vigorous growing vines, so it's really important to choose the right size of the clematis for the space that you have available. If you have a very small balcony garden, choose a clematis that's below 2 meters tall. If you have a little bit more space, 3 to 4 meters tall. Anything larger than this risks to be too large for containers. It can be done. Here you can see I have a Clematis montana Maylene that can grow up to 8 meters tall. It's not gonna reach that size in containers, but still that means that you will need a lot of space for that plant to climb and a large container. What type of pot is best for your clematis? I've heard the theory that you should always plant clematis in a terracotta pot. Well, I can guarantee you this isn't true. Terracotta is a great option, but keep in mind that terracotta is a very porous material. And remember what we said at the beginning? Clematis likes its roots moist and cool. So terracotta will lose moisture throughout the entire surface of the pot, so the soil will dry out quicker in a terracotta pot. So I think you can get away with planting your clematis in a terracotta pot. I have one planted in a terracotta pot in my garden, but I tend to lean more towards the plastic because plastic will not lose moisture throughout the entire surface. It holds on moisture longer, so I think this makes it a better option for a clematis that likes its roots cool and moist. To grow clematis in your container garden, you will need a decent sized pot. There's really no point planting your clematis in a small container because it's going to outgrow it pretty rapidly. So start already with the final pot. Now, if you have a smaller clematis that grows below 2 meters tall, then a pot that's about 40 centimeters wide and tall should be sufficient. A larger clematis, 3 to 4 meters tall, pot that's about 45 by 45 should be good. Then obviously the larger the plant, the larger the pot you will need. So for any larger clematis, you will need a pot that's probably about 50 centimeters tall and wide. Now, if you don't have a lot of space, like a lot of floor space, you can choose a container that's more narrow, but then you have to choose a container that's also deeper because clematis does need a lot of space for its roots. If you want to grow healthy clematis that blooms abundantly, you have to plant it in a good quality substrate that's appropriate for clematis. You can't plant it in just any random potting mix. So for clematis, if you want to keep it simple, I would recommend something like John Innes No. 3. This is a very popular choice for trees, shrubs and larger climbers grown in pots. If it's not available where you live, you will have to create your own mix. Now, my go-to mix for clematises is 50% multi-purpose potting mix with added perlite. My favorite choice is light mix by Playground. Then to this I add 50% garden soil. Now this is very important. You have to add garden soil. That John Innes substrate contains garden soil because garden soil has some pretty amazing qualities. First of all, it's heavier than multi-purpose potting mix, and you want this container to be a bit heavy because it has to provide anchorage, it has to provide stability to not tip over in the wind. And then garden soil has incredible capacity of holding water. It will keep moisture in the soil. It will prevent that potting mix from losing moisture excessively in summer. Then it also holds minerals and nutrients better. Minerals and nutrients leach out pretty rapidly from a multi-purpose potting mix that contains peat, but garden soil is going to help keep those nutrients in the soil, and clematis is a very hungry plant. It needs a lot of nutrients to put on that beautiful flower show. So 50% multi-purpose, 50% garden soil. You can buy bagged garden soil pretty much in any garden center. And to this I add a couple of handfuls of organic matter, something like garden compost, worm castings, humus, or anything else. Leaf mold works really well as well. I already prepared my mix in here because I was actually hoping to plant my clematis in the fall. I didn't get to do it. So the right time to plant your clematis will be either in the fall, as I said, or early in the spring. Avoid planting it in the dead of the winter and in the heat of summer. And with all that information, the last thing left to do is to plant your clematis. Obviously, the container has to have drainage hole at the bottom. Don't add any extra layer of gravel, any extra layer of drainage. That's absolutely unnecessary. Fill it all the way to the top with soil. If you're picking your clematis at the garden center, if you're not ordering it online, pay attention to the base of the plant and try to choose a clematis that has multiple stems coming from the base of the plant, because then obviously we'll have more flowers in the current season. Now loosen the root ball a little bit, not too much, just to remove the compaction. And you want to plant your clematis a little bit deeper than it was planted in its nursery pot. All of this is to encourage, again, more stems growing from the base of the plant. So we're gonna backfill with soil and add more soil if needed. Gently press the soil. Now that you've planted your clematis, you have to provide it with some sort of support. Unsupported clematis is an unhappy clematis. Clematis needs something to climb on, to grow healthy, to grow strong, and to bloom beautifully. Clematis has what we call twisting petioles, so twisting leaf stems. Once it finds the support, it kind of wraps itself around it, and that's kind of how it supports itself. So the clematis that I'm adding to my container garden today is Clematis Josephine. It is a fairly small clematis. It grows only 2 to 2.5 meters tall in the ground, so in containers it's gonna stay on the smaller side. So for this clematis, I'm gonna use this large obelisk, and I will let it climb on its own and attach itself to this obelisk. But I'm also going to show you other ways I support clematises in my garden. So for my largest clematis, Clematis montana Maylin, I am supporting it and I'm training it up the wall using this metal trellis, but obviously this metal trellis is way too short for it. So then I placed white plastic hooks. I attached white plastic hooks to the wall, and I am attaching individual stems to these plastic hooks, and they do a pretty good job of guiding this clematis up the wall. This medium-sized Clematis jackmanii is growing on top of this arch that I placed inside of the pot and above my bench. So on this side I have Clematis jackmanii, on the other side I actually have a climbing rose, and these two hopefully at some point will meet each other in the center, and it's gonna be a beautiful flower show in here. Obviously, let's not forget to water our plant after planting. Just a splash of water. And just to finish, to give it a nice final touch, I'm gonna mulch the container with some pine cones. Alright, and then one last tip that I have for you today. Remember at the beginning when we said that clematis likes its roots in the shade? In a real garden situation, we often recommend planting something in front of the clematis, another plant that will kind of cast a shadow over the clematis roots, over the base of the plant. Well, you can use a similar trick in container gardens, but you would want to place another plant or a couple of plants in front of your clematis so that these pots kind of isolate the clematis pot, the root zone of the clematis, from the heat in summer. I don't necessarily recommend planting anything with the clematis. It's best to give the clematis all the space it needs for itself. Clematis is also a very competitive plant. It will compete with other plants for water and nutrients. So I just recommend placing a couple of pots in front. This will act similar way as planting something else in front of the clematis in a real garden situation. I hope that you enjoyed today's video and found it helpful. If you did, I would appreciate if you could leave it a thumbs up. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see each other in the next one.